everyone. So I wanted to go back to baby number 5. I want to tell you a little bit more of his story. Because after he was born, when we brought him home from the hospital, he was a normal, squishy, tiny newborn. After a couple weeks, I fed him and got him all cozy and tucked in and ready for a nap. And I was looking at him and just enjoying, the little newborn phase and looking at his nose and stuff like that. And then I realized he was holding his breath. And I watched him and he took a breath and then went back to sleep. And then he did it again, and this time I counted, and he held his breath for about 8 seconds. And he did it again and again and again. And it went between 8 and 15 seconds. And so I picked him up and, kind of woke him up a little, and then I called his pediatrician. And his pediatrician told me, take him to the children's hospital. So I took all the rest of the kids to grandma's house, my husband and I took him to the children's hospital, and they monitored him for 3 days. They had him on, oxygen monitors, a heart monitor. They did an ultrasound of his heart. They did x-rays on his lungs, and he came up perfectly healthy. He was a perfectly healthy baby. And it was so scary to have such a, important thing happen not at the doctor's, and it not happen at all when we were in the hospital. And the last day they told me tomorrow morning he's got to go home. There's, we aren't able to see anything. And they taught me CPR, and then we were like, good luck. And so that night in the hospital, I was holding him and feeding him and praying God to please let the monitors catch it. Please let them see what's wrong with him. And I laid him down in his crib, and I was watching him and praying and looking at him, and he held his breath. And I quickly looked up at the monitor, and it was tracking that he wasn't breathing. It was just flat. There was no oxygen, beep beep buttons. And I looked at my watch. I saw what time it was. I watched him, and he breathed and held his breath and breathed, and I picked him up and I held him to make sure he was safe. The next morning, the doctor came in and said, well, that's it. And I said, no, at this time, for this long, this many times, he held his breath. And the doctor left and came back and said, what happened right before that? I said, I fed him. And he said, oh, he's got acid reflux. This is how you take care of him. This is how he'll be okay. And now he's 11 years old. He outgrew his acid reflux, and he's perfectly healthy. He's a rowdy little boy, and he's fantastic. And I thank God every day for helping me figure out how to take care